It's July 2011, and Patti Elliott is at a family readiness group conference in Dallas, Texas. The place is packed with men and women all talking with each other about new ways to aid and assist family members of soldiers. For Patti, a native of North Carolina, being involved in this organization felt like a natural extension of who she was.
I had always been like the room mom, the team mom, all of that kind of stuff. So after Lucas joined the Army, I was his family readiness group leader.
Patti's son Lucas had enlisted 5 years earlier at the age of 17. His first deployment had been in Iraq in 2009, and he was back again, serving with the 805th Military Police Company. And then, in the middle of the conference, Patti received a knock on her door.
My knock on the door came at 6 a.m., a hotel room door. Lucas had been killed on Friday morning, the 15th.
Lucas had been the victim of a roadside bomb near Basra, Iraq. And here, 2 days later, his mother was given the news. But Patti wasn't alone. In fact, a number of people at the conference were already aware of what had happened and had gotten to work knowing what Patti would require at that very moment.
All of the folks in the 200th MP Command were there at this conference with me, and they all knew. They just couldn't tell me. So that had allowed them to put all of the groundwork in place. My knock on the door was at 6 a.m. By 8 a.m., I was on my way to the airport. They had already booked me a flight, and I was on my way back home to North Carolina.
Patti had spent the last 5+ years helping out other families of soldiers, being there for those who had lost one of their own family members. And now it was her time to lean on them.
I'm a firm believer that God puts you exactly where you're supposed to be at the moment you're supposed to be there. And being there with those folks, my Army family, was perfect timing. All of the training I had received, and I knew exactly what to expect. I could not have been any better prepared.
No one is ever truly prepared for an event like this. No one. But Patti Elliott, because of the people around her, was in the best place possible. Because of their care, love, and attention, the next part of her voyage was a little less difficult. And it was that experience that inspired Patti to become involved in an organization known as American Gold Star Mothers. In the summer of 1928, 25 mothers met in Washington, D.C., to create an organization whose mission was to comfort mothers who had lost a child in the line of duty. Now, almost 100 years later, American Gold Star Mothers is going strong and has aided countless service members, their families, and their communities. It's a true example of the beating heart of service today. In today's episode, our hosts sit down with 2 current members of Gold Star Mothers. First, they meet Patti Elliott, the president of the organization, and then Nichole Jackson Chilton, a new board member. They talk about their own journeys through tragedy, how working with the organization is the ultimate call to service. And on a more lighthearted note, they share some interesting experiences in the American court system. And 2 historical figures one of them is related to. I'm Carrie Varuhaikis, and this is Army Matters.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Army Matters. I am your co-host, the 15-star Mid of the Army, Dan Dailey, and I'm with my good friend,
Lieutenant General Retired Leslie Smith, the 66th Inspector General of the Army. I'm in charge of leadership and education and keeping an eye on Dan Blue Eyes Dailey. Dan, how are you today?
That's good. Do you get extra compensation for that part of your duties and responsibilities?
To keep an eye on you?
Yeah.
No, the boss, he says it's other dudes as a sign.
It's inherent in your responsibility.
It's inherent in responsibility.
Yeah.
Just like you have responsibility as a senior non-commissioned officer here at AUSA to keep an eye on us.
Yes.
We have a responsibility to keep an eye on you.
I'm responsible for ethics here.
Oh, I'm responsible for ethics here. So I guess we have to do that together. All right, that's good.
Yeah.
Standards. No, you're responsible for standards. I'm responsible for ethics.
All right.
All right. Is that fair?
That one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, so what are we talking about today, brother?
Well, I want to ask you a question.
So, Dan, you're familiar with Gold Star Mothers, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about your interaction with Gold Star Mothers.
Yeah. Gold Star Mothers. I'll tell you what. A sacred thing, as many of our listeners know out there. Mothers receive a gold star as a result of a loss of their loved one in combat. And I interacted with them every year. Mm-hmm. They visit Washington, D.C., and we spend a lot of time together in our Arlington National Cemetery. But what I didn't know until we did this podcast is all the other things they do.
Yeah. It was a directive that general officers would participate in the funerals of every soldier that was lost in combat. So the general officer would present the flag on behalf of the Secretary of Defense and Chief of Staff of the Army and a grateful nation. I tried to go meet the families and present them with the Gold Star pins. And it really gave me focus. You know what I mean, Dan?
Yeah.
And drive to understand the why of what we're doing.
So, Les, you know what impresses me the most about Gold Star Mothers? Their incredible resiliency.
Yeah.
It is absolutely expected.
Yeah.
That you're going to have tremendous amount of grief when you lose a son or a daughter. But what I realized is how they bond together and build that strength, and their resiliency was just incredible.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to hear that today in our podcast.
I agree.
You're definitely going to hear that today.
Yeah.
We're honored to have on our show two ladies from the Gold Star Mothers Foundation. First, Patti Elliott, the president of Gold Star Mothers, along with Nichole Jackson Chilton, who's part of the Gold Star Mothers board.
All right, so let's listen to the interviews.
Patti Elliott, welcome to the show, and thanks for being on Army Matters.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be with y'all.
Now, Patti, we're going to talk about the Gold Star Mothers program, your son Lucas, and much, much more. But before we do, I have an important question for you. You worked as a court reporter since 1997.
Oh, boy.
What is the most interesting trial that you've ever been part of in all that time?
Oh, wow. Oh, that's a tough one. The thing about being a court reporter is that just when you think you've heard it all, something comes in the next day that you're like, oh my gosh, that really happened. I think probably the oddest thing that ever happened was it was a personal injury case. So I do more civil kind of things than criminal. And a gentleman he had been injured in an accident, and as a result of it had lost his eye. And he had a glass eye, and he was getting a little angry with the defense attorney who was questioning him and maybe trying to imply that his injuries were not as bad as he was claiming. And he reached up and popped out that glass eye and rolled it across the table to the defense attorney and said, "Now you think I'm not injured?"
Oh my gosh, wait a minute. He pulled out his glass eye? Now that might be for another episode, but so let's take a step back there. You grew up in North Carolina. Did anyone from your family serve? And what were your thoughts about service growing up?
My uncle was a Marine in Vietnam, but he never went to Vietnam. He was in Korea for his entire deployment or time of service. And so he never saw combat. As you know, the Vietnam era veterans really don't talk about their service, no matter where they were.
Yeah.
And so my uncle never really talked about it. It was never anything that we ever thought about. And no other family members on my side of the family had ever been in the military. And during that time period, you're thinking the 70s and 80s, we really weren't in an active conflict. And so you didn't hear patriotism. The town flew the flags on the holidays and that sort of thing, but it really wasn't a topic of conversation. I think in my high school graduating class, which was about 220 folks, there were 3 young men who ended up joining one branch or other of the service. So it just wasn't something that was hugely a thing as I grew up.
And years later, your son joined the Army. Now, when did he first know that he wanted to serve his country?
So Lucas was 12 years old when 9/11 happened. We were a homeschool family. And so we sat that day and many of the days after that, just like most of America did, and watched all of the events unfold on TV. And at some point in that first day or two, Lucas looked at us and said, I'm going to join the military because I don't want this to ever happen to America again. So, of course, children want to be everything from an astronaut to a doctor, And so we kind of felt like we were proud that watching those events unfold brought out that patriotic attitude, but we thought he would change his mind. Well, shortly after that, he started shooting on a high-powered rifle team through the civilian marksmanship program. And this team was mentored by the Marine Corps rifle team out of Quantico. So Lucas was around these Marines and he heard their stories and got the fever from them. So the summer that he turned 17, one day he said, hey, are you going to be home this afternoon? And I said, yeah, we're going to be home. And he said, well, I'm going to bring somebody I want you to meet. Well, I'm thinking it's a girl. And that afternoon, though, when he walked in the door, right behind him was an Army recruiter. So he wanted us to sign for him so that he could go ahead and wanted us to sign for him to go in when he was 17.
My parents signed for me. I joined when I was 16 years old. I remember the day vividly. So do you know why he chose the Army versus the other services?
I don't. I think it's because he had heard so many horror stories about how hard Paris Island is for the Marines. And he thought that the Army would be a better bet than the Marines. But the funny thing about that is, so he was an MP. Of course, that means he did basic training at Fort Leonard Wood. So he left in January of 2006. And they get that little 30-second phone call. Hey, Mom, I made it. I'm here. And then hangs up. The first substantive phone call, he was able to talk to us. The first words out of his mouth were, Mama, I've never been so cold in all my life.
And unfortunately, Lucas passed away on July 15th, 2011. Patti, can you share with our listeners the events of that day, if you could, and how you were informed of it?
Well, this is a long and convoluted story. I'll give you the thumbnail version. I had always been like the room mom, the team mom, all of that kind of stuff, very active in my boys' lives. And so after Lucas joined the Army, I had the opportunity to get involved with his family readiness group. So I was his family readiness group leader. I was at a conference in Dallas, Texas, with all of the FRG leaders from the 200th Military Police Command. And my knock on the door came at 6 a.m., a hotel room door. So Lucas had been killed on Friday morning, the 15th. He was married. His wife had gone home for the summer. She wasn't in North Carolina. So there was some confusion about where she was and getting the casualty notification to her. And so that kind of delayed it. So I did not find out until Saturday morning. However, all of the folks in the 200th MP Command were there at this conference with me, and they all knew. They just couldn't tell me. So that had allowed them to put all of the groundwork in place. My knock on the door was at 6 a.m. By 8 a.m., I was on my way to the airport. They had already booked me a flight the day before, and I was on my way back home to North Carolina. I'm a firm believer that God puts you exactly where you're supposed to be at the moment you're supposed to be there. And being there with those folks, my Army family, was perfect timing. And all of the training I had received, and at that time they had a program called the Yellow Ribbon Reintegration Program that they brought families to prior to a soldier deploying. So I had the benefit of all of those experiences, that I understood this process and I knew exactly what to expect.
Patti, I'm terribly sorry for your loss. What's your favorite memory of Lucas?
Oh, man. He was blonde hair, blue eyes, and dimples. And he thought that that could get him anywhere, and it usually did. I have a picture of that I'm sitting here looking at now of him saying, "I'll always be your baby, but I'm a man now." And he was so thoughtful and kind. He would leave me little notes. Many of them I still have posted around my office in exactly the place where he left them. Probably the best memory, though, was after he had come back from a basic and AIT, that summer we went on a family vacation. And he and his older brother were always fighting with each other. And his older brother was bigger, so he usually got the best of him. But Lucas had learned some fancy new techniques at basic and AIT.
Oh, yes.
So they were in the swimming pool, and Brad was trying to dunk Lucas. And Lucas puts Brad in a chokehold and chokes him out. And I'm screaming, he's going to drown. And Lucas said, "No, I've got him. I've got him." And he's holding him up to keep him from going underwater. And Brad comes back to and finishes his sentence. It's like he never even realized that he had been out. And Lucas is just laughing. Needless to say, Brad never picked on him again.
It's similar to how I grew up. I was the baby of two older brothers, and my mom was constantly, oh my God, I bless her heart. we were good kids, but we got rowdy. So, as I mentioned, you became the president of Gold Star Mothers, an incredible organization that I've had the honor to work with several times in the past. But what are your goals during your term as the president for Gold Star Mothers?
So it's to continue to be an advocate for those who are currently serving and our veterans, and of course, the Gold Star community. We were founded in 1928. So we are coming up on our 100-year anniversary. And as I stand at events, as I go and participate in activities, whether it's volunteering at the VA hospital here locally or going to the Vietnam Wall or the World War II Memorial, as I go to these events, I stand there and I realize that I am standing in the shoes of all the thousands of mothers who have given up their children since the beginning of our country, and all of those who in the future that may follow in our paths and experience this same grief. And so the weight of that and ensuring that our organization remains a force and an advocate in serving our veterans in the military, y'all who take on that uniform provide such a tremendous selfless service, and your families sacrifice so much that it's important that we as Americans find a way to honor that service and ensure that you get everything that you are entitled to as a result of that service.
Now, a lot of people think that the Gold Star Mothers organization exists solely to take care of those who lost a service member in combat. But it does a whole lot more. Patti, can you tell us the things that you do for our active duty service members and their families today?
So we have 124 chapters, and they all do things a little differently in their local community and how they're able to support it. I could give you some good examples. Many of our chapters sponsor baby showers for expectant soldiers or family members. We have chapters who sponsor the family days for military units and plan the whole thing, or do the games with the kids, or serve the food, or donate the food, or plan the activities for the military units. We also have the military send-offs and homecomings that a lot of our chapters will participate in. We have a lovely lady here. I'm from North Carolina, and here in North Carolina, there's a lady named Maria Myers who lives near Camp Lejeune. I know that's Marine, but I've got to put it out there. She is in her 80s, almost 90, and she has not missed a single deployment or homecoming for the Marines in years and years and years. And she bakes cookies and takes them to every one of these. There are incredible women doing incredible things all throughout the country. If our children were still here, they would be advocating for their brothers and sisters that are still serving. And so we're standing in that gap and doing what they would be doing were they still here.
Patti, in your years of experience working with Gold Star mothers and with the family readiness groups in the Army, is there a specific moment that stands out to you the most?
No, I've had so many incredible moments and opportunities. Since I lost Lucas, this journey over the last 13 years has made me even stronger in my faith. And when a Korean War veteran sees you all in white and recognizes that you're a Gold Star mother and they cry, that is just so humbling to me because no, sir, you are the one who sacrificed. All I did was give birth. And the veterans are the true heroes out there. They have given so much and their families have sacrificed so much that it's just humbling to me, the honor and respect that the Gold Star mothers are shown.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that incredible work you do. And in September, we're going to have Gold Star Mother's Day. And
yes.
Can you tell us what's going to happen this year at Gold Star Mother's Day?
So we always make a whole weekend out of Gold Star Mother's Day, which is on the last Sunday of September. We'll have an open house at our headquarters in Washington, D.C., in the DuPont Circle area. And so we'll have an open house on Friday night. On Saturday night, we have a banquet that will be at Patton Hall on Fort Myer. And this year, we are having someone speak to us from the Library of Congress about the Veterans History Project, and also a former tomb guard from the Society of the Honor Guard, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. Those tomb guards provide such a tremendous honor to our heroes. And so we'd like to hear from them about their history and what their experience was like during their time walking the mat. And then on Sunday, we lay a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown, and we are following that up with a service, a commemoration. And this year, for the first time, we are doing it inside the amphitheater there at Arlington National Cemetery. We have invited several of the military dignitaries and our supporters and our members to that. And we are just looking forward to the opportunity to hear some words of wisdom from our leaders and give us that inspiration to continue to do the work that we do.
Yeah. So I'd like to close out with something that you were part of that touched me very personally. So I want our listeners to hear it. So you played a role in renaming one of our largest Army installations. Can you explain how that happened and what you did?
I was honored to be invited to sit on the renaming commission for Fort Bragg. And, you know, it was a very hot topic in every community. And here in North Carolina was no different. So there were maybe 25, 30 people in the room who were advocating for their different special interest groups for what the new name for Fort Bragg should be. And it was getting heated, for lack of a better word. And so I raised my hand, and General Dan McNeil, who was chairing the renaming commission, recognized me. And I said, with all due respect, my son did not give his life for any one demographic over the other. There are thousands and thousands of soldiers who have come through the gates of Fort Bragg, and there will be thousands and thousands more. My son died because he believed in the principles of liberty and freedom that we enjoy. And so General McNeil said, "Thank you, Miss Elliott, for that perspective. We appreciate it." And then we come back to the next meeting, and a smaller committee inside the larger renaming commission had met and announced that the name they were going to send forward to the Pentagon was Fort Liberty. And I was floored.
That's amazing.
And the early stories about it said the idea for the name Fort Liberty came from a Gold Star mother, and it didn't name me. So then in June of 2023, when the actual renaming ceremony happened, General Donahue, and he said, we've done a good job of keeping your name out of the press. And I said, you know what, sir? I don't care. I'm proud of this contribution. And he said, are you sure about that? And I said, yes, sir. So the next day at the actual ceremony, he called me out by name and had me stand up. And then, of course, from there, it was firestorm of the press wanting to know this story. But to me, that's my one little contribution, that we gave it a name that resonates with every person who has put on that uniform in the past and every person that will put that uniform on in the future.
Ma'am, I'll tell you, General Donahue told me that story firsthand. And when he said the part where you stood up and talked about your son fought for liberty, when he got to the word liberty, I said, that's perfect. That was perfect. And I'll tell you, you're exactly right. I mean, we all fight for that. And it is sometimes good to name things after individuals who made contributions to this great country we live in. We do that all the time, but you made a really good choice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thanks for joining us today, ma'am. We appreciate you, and we appreciate all that you're going to continue to do. Thanks for being on the show, and thanks for being an incredible example of a great American.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be with y'all.
Are you attending the upcoming AUSA annual meeting in Washington, D.C. this October? Would you like to be on the podcast? We will be at the show this year, speaking with as many attendees as possible. So please visit us at the Education Zone in the North Building of the Washington Convention Center from 14 October to 16 October. Take a moment to share why you serve. This is in support of an initiative from Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin III to have everyone in the military and veteran community, including you, to answer the question, why do you serve? So be sure to swing by the Education Zone in the North Building of the Washington Convention Center, and we'll be excited to meet you and possibly put you on our show. Join AUSA, the Army's premier professional association and host of the largest land power exposition in the United States. AUSA is open to everyone, including all ranks and components. So whether you have a relationship with the U.S. Army or simply want to honor those who serve, you can learn more at ausa.org/join.
Nichole Jackson Chilton, welcome to Army Matters.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start out by saying two names, and I want you to tell me why I'm doing so. Andrew Jackson and Sir Walter Raleigh.
Well, so doing an ancestry thing back in high school, we discovered that on my father's side, lineage goes back to President Andrew Jackson. And on my mother's side, we've discovered that my lineage goes back to Sir Walter Raleigh.
Really?
Don't know how all that correlates, but somehow it's there.
Okay. Well, that's still pretty cool. I haven't done that test because we couldn't do it in the military, and I just haven't decided to do it. But I found out that I had a long-lost brother because of 23andMe on Ancestry.com. And that was really very interesting the last few years.
I've done the same thing.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
I have a half brother that I found out that I have 4 years ago.
Wow.
So that's been interesting. And then was an only child my entire life until 4 years ago. And now I suddenly have an older half brother.
Yeah, that's amazing though. The thing that's very interesting for us was he was actually in the same places that we were. I mean, in the same place we used to come to in the summertime as kids growing up. So that's pretty cool. So he's we brought him into the family just like I'm sure you've done, Nichole, with yours.
Oh, for sure.
So let's talk about your own story first. You're a military brat.
Very much so. Born and raised.
Yeah. Describe your childhood growing up in various places.
So my parents used to tease me all the time, like parents do. And I'd never been to California at the time. And they go, "Oh, yeah, you've been to California. That's where you were conceived." And I'm like, "Thanks."
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
That's exactly what I wanted to know, right?
Yeah, exactly.
My dad went into the Navy in 1980. And I was born in 1981 in Norfolk, Virginia. My dad was stationed in Bethesda for a little bit of time. And then we moved to San Antonio, Texas, and he was stationed at Fort Sam Houston. And then he went to Adak, Alaska for 18 months, and I moved to North Carolina to stay with family. And when he came home, he had the opportunity to pick where he wanted to go, and he gave me the opportunity to pick. He says, "Here are your 3 choices." So I said, "Let's move to Florida." So we were stationed in Mayport, Florida, for a little bit of period.
So what did you think of the military when you were young?
I loved it. It's a way of life. I believe moving around gave me the opportunity to experience a lot of different cultures that I otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to experience staying stagnant in one state or town or growing up in the same area with the same people over and over again. And it's given me an appreciation for all these different cultures and allowed me to be a lot more open-minded towards different things, different events, being more fluid, understanding. I think it's just a well-roundedness is the best way I can describe it.
It's important, especially for our military folks to take the time because of places we have to go. So let's talk about your son, Skylar Andrew Jackson.
Correct.
Okay. So he became interested in the military at a very young age.
Very young age.
Yeah, describe how that happened.
He was always really into Legos and then documentaries like Nat Geo and Discovery Channel. And anytime there was like a war documentary or military documentary, he would just stay glued to the TV. And as he grew up through different grade levels and they started talking about the different history aspects, he just became enamored with it. He could talk to me about all the different tanks, all the different planes and what wars they were used. And he would talk to me for hours. And it wasn't my cup of tea, but I wanted to encourage that. So we'd always go to the library and rent books on military vehicles and airplanes and tanks. So when he decided to go in the military, it wasn't a shock.
All right, so he called you in 2019 and let you know that he was going to lift in the Navy.
Yes.
Tell me your reactions to that.
Absolutely. Was not shocked. He talked about it all through high school. He really wanted to do the military. And so when he said, "Hey, Mom, I just got back from the recruiter's office and I've decided I'm going to join," I was like, "Cool, when do you ship out?" It was like, I felt like he was one of those kids. The best way I can describe Skylar was that he is a dandelion floating in the wind. You think of those things and you make a wish and the seeds just go everywhere. That was Skylar. He was never one to have set plans. And when he decided to go into the military, I knew that that was going to be the structure he needed to become a man and to become more grounded and really figure out what he wants to do with his life.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was his job? What was his position?
He went in as an engineer, a diesel mechanics engineer, an engineman. So that's what he was doing. He was stationed at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado with Assault Craft Unit 1. And he was working on the landing crafts and the diesel mechanics.
So explain, this is Army Matters. So you got to explain to the Army people about what a amphibious landing craft is.
The best way that I can describe it, and I may be somewhat wrong, but I believe I'm correct, is that the boats that carried the jeeps or the military vehicles onto the beaches of Normandy, and when they stormed the beaches of Normandy, those are the ships or the boats that my son was working on.
So now we lost Skylar on June 26th. Can you tell us what happened?
This is a long story, and hopefully it makes sense. He'd moved to Tulsa, and right after my mother had died, and I had told him that, hey, you do you. Nothing's tying you to North Carolina. There's no reason for you not to go and see the world. And then when he got out of boot camp and was shipped out to California, I would talk to him pretty regularly. And I say regularly, at least once a week. And something just didn't seem right. I'd gone to Costa Rica the week before, and I'd only been back for a week, and I hadn't had a chance to talk with him. And there was just something nagging me that just felt wrong, just kind of like the universe was telling me something was wrong. And I called him on Saturday, the 25th, and just to catch up with him. And he declined my call, but he said, "Hey, Mom, I'm currently on duty right now. I'll call you later." I was like, "Okay, cool." I called my other son, and, I called my dad, made sure everybody was okay. Went to bed that night on Sunday and just had this overwhelming feeling that something was wrong. Sadly, I was woken up at about a little after midnight that Sunday night going into Monday, and I had 2 local police officers at my door, and they had come in and they had said, "Are you Nichole, Jackson Chilton?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And like, "We need to come in." And they're like, "Is your husband home?" And I said, "Yeah, he is." And he's like, "We need you to get him down here." And of course, no parent wants any police coming to their house. And of course, being an empty nest, I knew something had to have happened with one of my 2 boys. And then they had told me that Skylar had been in a fatal motorcycle accident. And he was traveling between Coronado and 32nd Street base and was ran off the road. And unfortunately, it killed him instantly. So he was supposed to have deployed out that Monday, and never got the chance to go. And we were supposed to go out there for his birthday. We'd already had everything planned out. I'd saw him, the last time I actually physically saw him and gave him a hug was his 22nd birthday. And he died in 2022, 2 months and 1 day shy of his 23rd birthday.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that with our listeners. What's your favorite memory of Skylar?
Oh, there's so many. There's so many. My most recent memory, and this one will live with me obviously forever, but right before he's sent out to Coronado, I was blessed to have him come home the last time for 2 weeks. And I remember him running out of the baggage claim and seeing me standing there waiting for him because I couldn't leave my car. And he just ran as fast as he could, picked me up, spun me around, and just gave me the biggest hug I think I've ever had. And that moment will definitely live with me forever. There's nothing better than getting hugs and love and affection from your own children when they're adults, because it kind of waxes and wanes. And to get that big old bear hug from a kid that I hadn't had a chance to see since he was 18, 19, it was just that unbelievable feeling. And and he was just so proud of who he was and who he had become with the military. He just couldn't wait to tell me. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, but he couldn't wait to tell me all the stories and everything that was going on. So,
wow, Nichole, that's so touching. So, how did you get involved with Gold Star Mothers after Skylar's death?
I was a part of a Facebook group called Navy Moms support group. I think it's a support group. It might just be Navy Moms. And a local Gold Star mother had reached out to me. She had saw a post of mine, kind of asking for support. I just found out Skylar had passed and didn't really know where to go from here. And she was able to get my number from a member. And she called me and she gave me a little bit about her story and how she became a Gold Star mother. And she had mentioned that there was a Gold Star family dinner happening in August, and told me that I should probably sign up and attend and see what it's all about and just, remember Skylar. And of course, I asked, questions, day, time, place. And it was kind of like a God wink, because when she told me the date, it happened to be my son's birthday. And so Skylar had just passed on June 26th, and she tells me that the date is August 27th. I was like, you're kidding me, right? This is like a sign I have to go. So I went, and I was instructed that I should meet Miss Patti Elliott. And I remember seeing her and just looking at her in awe. And it's almost like a beacon of light just shined down and said, if she can do this with the grace and poise that she has after losing her own son, I can do this. And it was then that I knew that I needed to join American Gold Star Mothers. I signed up that weekend, I believe. So September 1st, I believe, was when I officially signed up. I knew what a Gold Star family member was, or a Gold Star member was. And I used to tell Skylar, don't ever make me a Gold Star mom, because it's not a club I want to be a part of. But they reached out to me and invited me into this event. And I knew that's where I needed to be. I think that's what Skylar was telling me I needed to do.
Yeah. So what's the most important thing that the Gold Star Mothers did to help you in your first year after we lost Skylar?
Just giving me the support and letting me know that it's going to be okay. That giving me reason to move forward. I know my son would never want me to enter that depression state. I know that he wants me to carry on. But that's easier said than done when you lose a child. And, seeing them go through the same things that I've gone through, and they are as resilient as they are, and they are continuing to honor their children, gave me direction to push my grief to. And I know my grief will always be there, but now I've learned how to sit down and welcome it and learn to live with it and know that that's just part of my story.
All right, cool. So what piece of advice would you give for someone who just lost their child?
I think I'm still learning myself.
Yeah.
It's okay to not be okay. I think that's the biggest thing, but you have to admit when you're not okay and not be afraid to reach out for help. I don't think any of our children would want us to be in a moment of despair and depression all of our lives, and they would all want us to continue to go forward. And of course, that's easier said than done. But admitting that you're not okay and taking that time for yourself to rise above it is the best advice I think I can get. I carry on only because I know my son would want me to. And I try to follow where he leads me. And he led me to Gold Star. And my impact may only be a little bit, but you know what happens when you throw a pebble into a lake? It ripples out. And that's just what I hope I can do, is I just hope I can affect and keep that ripple going and really help as many people as I can.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. The Secretary of Defense has asked people who served in the military to get on social media and talk about why I served. Can you tell our listeners about why you serve?
Why I serve?
Mm-hmm. You kind of do it at least two ways that I know of.
Yeah. Why I serve is because of my son. Again, fulfilling that mission that he didn't get to do. It's important to me to continue to support our military. And, supporting my military is also supporting my family and myself. We rely on our sons and daughters and aunts and uncles and all those that have joined so much more than a lot of people realize. And they need our backs just as much as we need theirs.
Nichole, thanks so much for taking the time to join us here on Army Matters.
Absolutely. And it's been a pleasure, Les.
Yeah.
I appreciate you.
I appreciate your service.
Thank you.
If you listen to our show regularly, you know that our hosts, Les and Dan, attend a number of ceremonies and meetings with future leaders and community professionals. In today's Chapter Spotlight, we'd like to highlight a social networking event in Texas last month that would have been perfect for them to attend. On August 7th, the Texas Capital Area chapter joined with the Round Rock Chamber of Commerce to co-host a young professionals social networking event. Held at the Pint House Pizza restaurant, the gathering included speakers from the two organizations, as well as guest speakers from the United States Army Futures Command, Major Jones and Major Webster. But more importantly, it featured a lot of fun networking opportunities, new memberships, and of course, pizza and pints. Special kudos go to Danielle Morrissey, the chapter's Vice President for Young Professionals, for spearheading this event, and congrats to everyone involved. If you or your chapter would like to be profiled on the show, please email us at podcast@ausa.org. Hua.
To all our listeners, thanks for joining us. Army Matters is brought to you by the Association of the United States Army, the U.S. Army's professional association, member-supported, Army-connected. Visit us at ausa.org for more information or to become a member. Your membership helps AUSA continue to carry out its mission, educate, inform, and connect with the total Army, our industry partners, and supporters of a strong national defense. Today's episode was hosted by Lieutenant General Retired Les Smith and SMA Retired Dan Dailey, an anchor hosted by Carrie Barrow-Heckes. Anthony Del Call is the producer and writer, and Andy Bosnag is the supervising sound editor. Ellen Toner is the content editor. Unzinga Curry is the executive producer, and the senior producers are Carrie Barrow-Heckes and LaSharon Duncan. Be sure to subscribe to Army Matters wherever you get your podcasts, and please leave a review. As you know, we love seeing stars in the Army, especially if it comes in the form of a 5-star review. AUSA's Army Matters podcast can also be heard on Reach Across America Radio on Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, on the iHeartRadio app, the Odyssey app, and the TuneIn app with the search of the word Reef. AUSA's Army Matters podcast primary purpose is to entertain. The podcast does not constitute advice or services. While guests are invited to listen, listeners, please note that you're not being provided professional advice from the podcast or the guest. The views and opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect the views of AUSA. For questions or to provide topic recommendations, email us at podcast@ausa.org. I'm LaSharon Duncan. Hope you have a great Army Day. Hua.